Hey everybody, let's go ahead and dive into the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook. We're looking at the period from March 15th through 19th. We see below normal temperatures out west, which we call a negative PNA. I feel like I start every video talking about this because it's such a glaring feature right now. Essentially, it means cold in the west, which in turn forces warmth to move into the central portions of the country, as you can see. But especially in the eastern portions, we expect significantly above normal temperatures during this time frame. I should also mention, and I forgot to say this at the beginning of the video, that we have some extended range storm prediction center outlooks for days 6 and 7, or maybe day 5 and 6. These are tied to a very significant, possibly historic storm in the plains, which is expected to bring severe weather to parts of the southern plains, some of the Midwest, and into the deep south. I think it could even extend into the southeastern states around day 7 or 8. So we'll dive into that a little later. Precipitation outlook. Looking at the precipitation during this period, we still expect above normal precipitation throughout much of the west. This pattern also extends into the Midwest, northern plains, and Great Lakes as low pressure systems move through these areas. What tends to happen in this pattern is the development of cold fronts, which trigger storms throughout the areas that start to turn green in the deeper south. With this stronger low, likely in the 970s or 980s, we'll probably see a secondary low develop underneath, which is very common. This secondary low will likely form in the 990s and will only enhance precipitation for these areas. So we really expect a lot of activity in the east as these major western storms move through. The only area expected to see below average precipitation is Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and parts of southern Kansas. But overall, it's looking pretty wet across most of the country. 8 to 14 day outlook. For the 8 to 14 day outlook, covering March 17th through 23rd, temperatures are still expected to be below normal in the western portions of the U.S. Again, this is going to continue to force warmth into the central and especially the eastern states, where we're expecting some pretty significantly above normal temperatures. When it comes to precipitation during this period, confidence is a bit lower. The lighter shades used on the map suggest that forecasters are less certain about these predictions. We still expect above average precipitation for portions of the west and east, but the south central region, including parts of Texas and Oklahoma, remains in the below average precipitation category. Confidence levels are only around 33% to 40% for these lighter shades, so there's a good chance some of this could swing the other way. 3 to 4 week outlook. This brings us to the 3 to 4 week temperature outlook, which covers March 22nd through April 4th. This gives us a good long range view from the Climate Prediction Center. They typically do an excellent job, though I do sometimes disagree with their outlooks, and I'll always let you know when I do. For this period, warmth is expected to prevail in the central and eastern states. This isn't surprising since the short-term and medium-term outlooks have been showing the same trend. If we make it to April 4th with above normal temperatures, even a return to average or slightly below average will feel a lot warmer compared to early or mid-March. It really feels like an early spring, even though it's been a little cooler the past couple of days. By early next week, Monday through Wednesday, and into the following weekend, I think a lot of folks will be seeing 60s, 70s, and even 80s in the farther south areas. It's going to start feeling like spring in a big way, which means you might have to break out the lawnmower. Call me crazy, but I always look forward to the first mow of the season. Of course, by the 4th, 5th, or 6th mow, I'm dreading it, but that's just how it goes. Precipitation outlook for late March. For the precipitation outlook during this 3 to 4 week period, we're seeing above normal precipitation in the Northwest, parts of the Midwest, Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, and Northeast. Below normal precipitation is still expected in the south central region. I've had a bit of a gripe with these precipitation maps because they resemble a typical La Nina pattern. We've seen this bias from the Climate Prediction Center and the National Weather Service all winter. A lot of people have pointed out that the Northeast has been drier than normal despite forecasts for above average precipitation. I think this is because the National Weather Service leaned into the La Nina pattern too heavily. There was guidance to support that, so it wasn't necessarily a bad idea, but they stuck with it even when it didn't pan out. I've been saying for a while that we were more in a neutral ENSO pattern, not a true La Nina. And that's why I think these long range precipitation maps have been a little off, especially in the Northeast. In the West has been wetter than average overall, but it hasn't just been the Northwest like a La Nina would suggest. It's been the whole Western seaboard. The only thing I agree with is the dry pattern in the South Central U.S. because that's been very consistent. Recent trends, looking at the past 10 days, including the final day of February and the first 9 days of March, it's been a toss-up. Most of the country has been warm except for the far Southwest, which has been slightly below normal. The warmest area has been east of the Rockies, including the plains, parts of the Midwest, and into the east. But we know from the previous outlooks that this warm pattern will likely continue in the weeks to come. So expect more yellows and even oranges and reds on future maps. Major upcoming storm. Both the European and American models agree on a major storm developing in about 6 to 7 days. The Storm Prediction Center already has outlooks issued for this system, which is very similar to the one we saw around March 3rd to 5th. When the Storm Prediction Center issues outlooks this far out, it's usually a bad sign. They normally wait until it's within 3 days unless they're confident it's going to be significant. With a low pressure in the 970s or 960s and a strong cold front, this could be a major severe weather outbreak. We're moving into a very warm area, which is just a recipe for severe weather. It couldn't be more obvious, really. We have thunderstorms today throughout the Deep South, mostly concentrated on the eastern side. This update is from 2 p.m. It's 3:20 right now, so things have likely developed further since then. I believe there's a severe weather watch in effect somewhere in the Deep South with some thunderstorms already firing off. It's shaping up to be a pretty active thunderstorm day down there. I'm sure those of you watching from that area would agree. Storm development. As we move into tomorrow afternoon, we see this system developing into a low pressure system off the southeast coast. We continue to see thunderstorms in the southeast corridor, though they'll likely be a little less intense than they are today, Sunday the 9th. Still, the thunderstorm threat will persist. This low right here is going to have trouble pushing up the east coast because the wind is coming almost directly from the southeast, if not straight east. That's going to force the low to slide off the east coast quickly, which has been the forecast pattern for this storm for quite a while now. By Monday night into Tuesday, the system will try to push up the east coast, but it'll ultimately lose that fight and drift off to the east. That's consistent with how this storm has looked on the models for some time. Western storm system. By Wednesday the 12th, we start to see activity pushing in from the Pacific onto the west coast. There's a low pressure system of 989 millibars just east of the Sierra Nevada and another one around 995 millibars over the Canadian Rockies. This setup is going to bring mountainous snowfall and heavy rainfall at lower elevations and coastal areas. By Thursday afternoon, this pattern worsens as cold air gets drawn in. Now we have a stronger low to the east, setting up a dry cold front and a dry warm front. This will pull cold air down the west coast, switching more areas from rain over to snow. Initially, only high elevations will see snowfall, but as cold air sinks lower, snowfall levels will drop by several thousand feet, maybe even more than that. At the same time, coastal and low elevation areas will continue to see rain. These western storms are very typical of this pattern. Major central U.S. storm. Let's jump to Friday the 14th, which is when things really get interesting. We see a low pressure system at 976 millibars over eastern Colorado and western Kansas. To clarify, a low in the upper 900s isn't historic. It would need to be around 970 millibars or into the 960s to reach historic levels. Some models, like the GFS, have been hinting at potentially historic pressure levels, but that doesn't mean the impacts will necessarily be historic. Pressure alone doesn't determine storm intensity, but it often correlates with stronger impacts. Take care, everyone. I'll be back tomorrow with a new update. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment. See you